just call him a fat fuck?
Yeah, why did you say that? Why did you say that? Well, yes,
why did you just call him a fat fuck?
You did. You said that.
Barbara,
You did that.
Why did you? I just heard you.
That's right. You heard it. Okay. What did you say? What did you just say?
You just called him a
You
fat
called
fuck.
me a fat
Why
fuck
did you
right
call
now.
him a
You
fat
did.
fuck?
You just did.
Why did you
Are you
just
gonna
do
lie
that,
about
Barbara?
that? Are you gonna lie about
Barbara,
that,
why did
Barbara?
you just
Are you
call
gonna
him a
lie
fat
about that?
fuck?
You said that.
You just
You
called
said
him
that
a
with a
fat
witness.
fuck. Why did you do
Okay.
that?
Where are you
I'd
going,
like to know
John?
your
Why can't you say that? Why can't you say that? Why can't you say that? What you said? Yes, you did. You called me a fat fuck right in front of it. Right in front of
Why
it.
did you do it?
That's exactly what you did.
Why did you do it?
No. I want to know if you are a man.
Why did you do it?
If you are a man.
Why did you do it?
No, that is not a process. That is an assault. That is a verbal assault. That is a verbal assault.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is the sound of democracy right there. Oh my God. Those were the days, eh, Stoops?
Oh my gosh. That's all I have to say.
Unbelievable. Tonight we are discussing my personal favorite politician, probably of all time, but especially of all the Canadian politicians, the Honorable His Worship, the Mayor, Rob Ford. Here we go.
May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace. It's very unfortunate. What sparked my interest in doing this episode was last Tuesday. It was the 6th year anniversary of his passing, and it was kind of a solemn occasion for me, as it is every year. And I decided this year, why don't we do another episode? An episode about Rob Ford, and just sort of recap his existence and his life on the Toronto political scene. What do you think, Stoops? Are you gonna share a little bit about your experience? We both lived through this. We're both Torontonians.
Yes.
So you were there with me during the height of all of this craziness.
This is the lockdown lowdown, by the way.
This is the Lockdown Lowdown. Joining me tonight is Andrew Stupart.
Which apparently I don't need any introduction because, you went right in with the clip. And I love that clip. I had sent you a different clip to lead off with, but that fat fuck clip was the best way to start the show. It just shows he's a man of passion. He's,
Absolutely.
You know what, no matter what you can say about him, he's passionate. And he's got gusto, and he's got energy, and he's got just a zest for life.
There's a lot of criticism. You can criticize him for a whole lot of things.
Yes.
But one thing that you have to admit is he's a person that speaks from the heart.
Oh, yes, from the heart. Never. That's the thing with Rob Ford. It's kind of like me in the professional workplace or in different scenarios. I don't know where the line is sometimes. And I will say things in a professional setting or in a family setting that I shouldn't, because that little voice in my head that tells me to shut the fuck up doesn't exist. And that's just like tenfold with Rob Ford. Like things that you should never say at a press conference in front of the media, in the city council chambers. He just fucking does it anyway. And he just speaks his mind. And despite all we'll talk about the horrendous scandals that plagued Toronto 10 years ago. But despite all that, he is definitely a man of character.
Yeah, he speaks from the heart. He is always he's not a polished politician.
No.
No
impulse control. The thing is, he has no impulse control.
No impulse control. Like he's not your politician that was raised going to Harvard, learning how to debate, learning how to just like get the perfect words out and just persuade people just the right way. He is not a sleazy politician in the typical way that you see. And that's just kind of the way it is in Toronto politics. Anybody that's above the age of 18 and is a citizen living in Toronto is allowed to run for mayor. And so the fact of the matter is you get all types one way or another, he ran a pretty brilliant campaign and it all worked out in the end. So I'm going to just sort of introduce our viewers to Rob Ford. I'm sure that everybody knows who he is, but I'm just going to sort of take you back. Rob Ford was born in Etobicoke, Ontario in 1969. He's the youngest of 4 children. His father was the co-founder of a small business called Deco Labels and Tags. His father was a Conservative member of provincial parliament from 1995 to 1999. So his family was very active in politics. And obviously him and his brother both worked in the family business in various capacities. Rob spent a lot of time coaching football for the Toronto District School Board. His family is referred to as the Toronto Kennedys. And he was first elected to Toronto City Council in 2000 and was re-elected to his council seat twice before running for mayor. And there was just a lot of craziness that happened even before he became mayor. Everybody knows about the crack scandals. Everybody knows about that stuff. But before that, when he was just a councillor, it was really quite amazing the amount of things that he would get attention for. He was a lot. I mean, I think if I could explain him to people, really sum him up quite simply, if you can imagine the kid in your class that had sort of attention deficit disorder, the kid in your class that was just always causing trouble, and the teacher would put him in the back or, try to put him away from the other more productive students. That was Rob Ford. I mean, he was always causing problems. And when you juxtapose that against these straight edge, very leftist, very liberal, but very professional looking and sounding city councilors, it was just hilarious to watch. And when he was, sitting in council, like, you always knew like something crazy was going to happen, like every week that he was in there.
He's the prankster at the back of the class.
Exactly. I'm just going to play some clips here of his time as city councilor.
Awesome.
Calling me a Geno boy is totally inappropriate.
I'm not a racist, and I would like to apologize to Colin. I'm not a racist.
Roll the tapes.
I did not say that.
It's very preventable. If you're not doing needles and you're not gay, you won't get AIDS probably.
And Ford recently apologized for being drunk and belligerent at a Leafs game.
I made a mistake. I'm only human, and I don't know what more to say. I apologize.
You're known for being very outspoken.
I speak the truth, and I watch taxpayers' money, and I treat taxpayers' money with respect.
Rob Ford placed a 911 call to the police late evening, March 25th, because of his spouse's irrational behavior. And as a result of consultation with the police, he left the family home with the children.
What about those?
So yeah, how do you feel about that? If you aren't using needles and you're not gay, then you won't get AIDS probably. How's that?
Yeah, that was when he
sounding?
decided that he wanted to kind of go against the city donating to an AIDS charity. Is that the context there?
Yeah, I mean, there was always a lot of different grants being given out to various groups.
Yeah.
And, meanwhile, municipalities aren't supposed to be running a deficit, but somehow Toronto has actually a ton of debt. So I don't know how that works. I'm not really that into municipal politics to know how a city like Toronto is actually allowed to go into debt, but somehow it happens. And and that was like a big thing that got him elected, was that the people of Toronto were starting to get upset with what they saw as mismanagement of public funds. There was a lot of really big ticket items that were being planned and purchased, and Rob Ford really took a stand against that. I'm just going to like list off just like a couple of the crazy things that were going on around the time that he was running for mayor. They were planning a $1.2 million bike hub or station, or like a bike parking garage under City Hall. Like that's crazy to me. Like that sounds like something that only serves city employees and counselors and that type of thing. Like if you're working at a business right next to City Hall, I could see how maybe that would help you get to work. But like so often there's places that you can chain your bike somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't seem to me like something that's really necessary. There was an $88 million waterfront arena planned with four. So basically it was like 4 ice pads, like hockey arenas stacked on top of each other. $88 million. And that was planned for the Toronto waterfront. And Rob Ford came in. He's like, why shouldn't the private sector be covering this? Like if there is such a demand for all of these hockey rinks on the waterfront, then surely the private sector is going to want to come in and make a profit off of that. But the reality is nobody wanted to do something like that because it was a disaster waiting to happen. And, if it's the taxpayers that are taking a bath, then that's okay. Like it was just ridiculous. And on top of that, like really the biggest mistake that had happened just before he got elected was purchasing $1.2 billion of streetcars from Bombardier. And I mean, everybody, it's a controversial issue in Toronto, but I tend to agree with his perspective on this. Streetcars, just to explain it to people, streetcars run on a dedicated track in the center of the street. So every time the streetcar needs to stop to let people off, it stops in the middle of the street and it blocks off the lane of traffic to the right in order for people to get out of the streetcar and walk across. So every time this thing has to stop, like, how annoying it is to be stuck behind a city bus. Well, imagine both lanes of traffic both have to stop every time that bus stops. Exact same situation with the streetcar. So, it's an outdated type of transit technology. Most major cities in Canada had streetcars at one point, including the city I live in, Ottawa. It had streetcars and we got rid of them because they're crap and they clog up city streets, and it's just not a good way to get people around. Meanwhile, Toronto has kept theirs. They have expanded their streetcar infrastructure, and on top of that, they're buying $1.2 billion from a very questionable Canadian company, Bombardier. None of this happened while he was in office, but after the fact, delivering on these streetcars became its own huge scandal where basically Bombardier had taken this 1.2 billion and they weren't delivering. Like
I remember that. Yeah,
these
I remember that.
streetcars just were not being manufactured.
Yeah.
And it was a big mess for entirely different reasons. But anyways, that's the type of stuff that Rob Ford was trying to get rid of. And I think there's so many reasons to criticize Rob Ford, but I really agree with his sort of like fiscal conservative attitude.
Yeah.
When he was running for mayor, his two sort of taglines were respect for taxpayers' money and stop the gravy train. And I really think that those are like the two most brilliant taglines that you can have in politics. Like, number one, like respect for taxpayers' money. A lot of people criticize conservatives because they're like trying to put money back in your pocket and that type of thing. And it's like, that's not really it. Like, I'm not looking for a big payday. I'm not looking to have my taxes cut in half. I'm happy to pay taxes. I just want those taxes to be respected by the
Yes.
people that are distributing them. Simple as that. Do you have any thoughts on that matter, Stoops?
You know what? We've talked about this a few times. You talked to Andrew Stupart of 10 years ago, and he's leaning towards the at least at the federal or provincial level, leaning towards the NDP, the Liberals. But now that I'm in my 30s, I've been in the workforce, purchased my first home, purchased a car, done those major purchases, gone through a marriage, I'm in my first marriage. Now that I've grown up a little bit, I understand, wanting, whether it's at the municipal, provincial, or federal level, people leaning towards conservatism, at least from a fiscal point of view. Again, I don't support social conservatism, but from fiscal responsibility, I mean, let's look at his brother. I don't agree with each and every single thing that Doug Ford's done, but I just got my license plate rebate. It was almost $400 back in my pocket. I mean, why? I'm already paying, to gas up my car. I'm already paying, taxes to do road infrastructure and repair. I'm already paying taxes for X, Y, and Z. Why do I have to pay a separate fee to drive my car? I think it was absolutely ridiculous, that little sticker on the back of the car. So when I got that $400 back, I was like, you know what? Thank you, Doug Ford. Thank you very much. And so I guess to answer your question, I agree. It's not that I want to pay no taxes. It's not that I want to go to a model that they have in the States. I mean, they have a pretty atrocious system in the States for some things. I don't mind living in fact, I'm happy to be living in a country with a social safety net. But to your point, I do want politicians to respect your dollar. And as much as Rob Ford was outspoken and highly criticized and plagued with controversy, stopping the gravy train and being respectful of the Toronto taxpayer dollar, I agree with that sentiment. And I agree with your sentiment about streetcars. I mean, I've driven downtown. I've driven to the office a couple times, and like, man, you think buses are bad? To your point, like, streetcars are 10 times worse, and they just clog up the street. If anything, I remember one of the things that he campaigned on was the subways. And I won't get into all that because it takes Toronto forever to build anything. But one of the things that I was really happy is that they'd settled on further expansion of the subway. This was the Scarborough subway that he had platformed on, if I'm not mistaken. And the whole idea is you should be expanding transit underground, or give it its own designated area. Putting streetcars in the middle of the street, as you said, clogs traffic. And so I guess at the end of the day, there are some things that I do respect about, or that I did rather respect about Rob Ford. And a lot of that was his sort of fiscal responsibility.
Thank you. Yeah, very well put. I mean, his whole thing was like, why aren't we building more subways? Anybody that's ever been to Toronto and ridden on public transit knows that our subway system, compared to any other major city like New York or even Montreal, like not nearly as big of a city, Montreal, you'll know that the subway infrastructure is very bare bones. Like, most of the public transit infrastructure is surface level. It's integrated right into the streets. Whether it's buses, streetcars, light rail transit, that type of thing. And it was about time that somebody came along and said, okay, you know what? It's not that we can't afford to build subways, because subways are crazy expensive. It's not that we can't afford it. It's that we're spending so much money on other stupid crap that we can't afford it. Any other city would be able to. So I just want to cover a little bit of the good of Rob Ford. We're going to play a lot of video clips of Rob Ford's sort of, personal failings and
That's a very polite way of putting it.
and scandals and things like that. But I just want to talk a little bit about his campaign first.
You know what, Alex? I think this is dragging on. I mean, I think even you said to me, like, the first couple minutes of the podcast is where you want to get people's attention, and you're talking about all these wonderful things that Rob Ford did 10 years ago. But I want to get to the juicy stuff.
You want to get to the juicy stuff. We will get there. Trust me. The payoff will be brilliant.
All right.
Okay. I want to talk to you guys like a little bit about his mayoral campaign. Like, so again, he's not a polished politician, right? He doesn't have those slick words, like speeches that are prepared. Everything is like focus group tested and stuff like that. Like, he is a very sort of like grassroots candidate. But it's really kind of amazing, like in terms of the slogans that he chose and the persuasiveness behind those slogans, like stop the gravy train. So that's something that's very visual. And it's really impressive that he was able to come up with something that's that persuasive, because that's something that just like paints a picture in everybody's mind. When you have something that's that visual, every time you say it, it's just like it just sticks in your mind, and it's brilliant. So during this campaign, the conventional thought at the time was that conservatives could not win in Toronto. And basically he just like disregarded this and bypassed all the traditional media outlets. He used a massive telephone town hall event to call 40,000 homes throughout Toronto. He simultaneously, called these people all at the same time and invited them to like a talk radio style event hosted by Ford. And this was like not how campaigns had been done in the past. Basically what you would do is you would basically win over the media. So the Toronto Star would fall in love with you, and then they would basically do all your campaigning for you. And then you would win based on that. But he had just completely circumvented, the very sort of like left-leaning media in Toronto. And so yeah, I'm just gonna play a clip of him at this radio style event that was hosted by him. And basically this is what he did. He sort of like got everybody to come out to this event, and he sort of like told them what he was gonna do. So I'm just gonna play that a little bit for you.
I'm the only person tough enough to go down to City Hall and put an end to the wasteful spending and put an end to the grading train. When I first got elected 10 years ago, they said, you have to use that $53,000. I said, I guarantee I won't. After 10 years, John, I've never touched that $53,000. I said, the staff budget, the $210,000 to hire staff. I said, you don't need 3 or 4 or 5. They said, oh yes, you will. You're going to be just like the rest of them. I've saved in 10 years, the taxpayers, $1.5 million just by myself. I've saved it, John. I will guarantee I'm going to abolish that $60 car registration tax and the land transfer tax. Within 4 years, that will be gone. I will guarantee that 4 years, people are going to say he said what he said, he did what he said he was going to do. And I will guarantee we're going to get lower that expense account. We're not going to have $12,000 retirement parties, which my good friend Mr. Smitherman thinks it's great to have using taxpayers' money. I will guarantee I'm going to do it. We're going to get this spending under control once and for all.
I want to pursue the deal because the examples you've given are important, and they're examples of the.
So that was Rob Ford basically, wooing the audience for the first time. A lot of people showing up to this event. It's the first time that they had ever heard of this guy. And he's just like, he's so intense and so passionate, and there were moments throughout his leadership where you honestly question yourself, like, how did people vote for this guy? But when you watch moments like this, like, you can absolutely understand why people voted it for him. Like, this guy, he, like, just from the way that he talks, like, he's not like very well spoken, but you can tell that he's a fighter. And
well, a couple things here. Number one, he's a real guy talking to real people. One of the things I hate about Justin Trudeau, or a lot of politicians that we've seen come and go throughout Canadian history, is everything they say is very scripted. Their PR is intricately put together, their strategy, right? And so I think something that was both controversial and refreshing about Rob Ford is that he's just an average guy. He likes to kick back, have a beer, maybe one too many beers, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing, right? Watches football, coaches football, likes to kick back, have those brewskis. And so he's a real guy talking to real people about fiscal responsibility. And that was very well done. I didn't realize that he had done 1010, the news talk, in order to engage people on his platform. But that was a smart move because, to your point, yes, I agree that a lot of the media in Toronto, if they're not center, they are center leaning left or even left in some cases, depending on the outlet, for sure. And so, and then on top of that, Toronto, because of the nature of the city, the nature of the voter base, it's a very much, at least at the provincial level, for the MPPs and the federal level for the MPs, it's very much a liberal centered stronghold. It is a liberal city, right? Like that's how the votes usually go down. So for him to come in there and platform on 1010, talk to everyday people about fiscal responsibility, and just be the normal average guy who wants to be respectful of tax dollars, he did a good job. And obviously he got through to people because he won the election.
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly it. Like, he was really up against a lot just as a conservative being in power in a city like Toronto, where the major publication is the Toronto Star. And the Toronto Star is very similar to like CNN in the United States, like very left leaning. And yeah, so it was really kind of impressive that he took it upon himself to do News Talk 1010. It was actually partway through his leadership as mayor that him and his brother started an actual weekly radio show. So trying to, again, circumvent the mainstream media and basically speak to people directly from the mouth of Rob Ford. Like, this is what I'm doing. It's kind of impressive. I mean, at the end of the day, it was like a very low budget sort of radio talk show. And it didn't last for very long. And eventually they moved to YouTube and that type of thing. I just want to play a short clip of their radio show, just to give people like a rough idea of like what it was that they were doing.
The $60 million that I proposed. Let me tell you what councillors get for free, which I have never taken as a councillor. I've been down there 14 years. Every councillor gets a free zoo pass. Free parking at the zoo, free admission, which the average person has to pay $23, free rides, and not just for them, for the whole family. That's just the zoo. They get a free Metro pass. That's equivalent to about $1,500 a year. A free Metro pass. When the average hardworking person has to pay for their Metro pass, these councillors get them for free. You know the Green Pea parking lots? You know when you have to go park your car somewhere and maybe on a Saturday night or whatever, go to the theater and go for dinner? They get to park for free. This is absolutely ridiculous. Any parking lot in the city of Toronto, anytime, any weekend, that is absolutely wrong. You know when the exhibition's on, free exhibition place passes, free parking, $30. The average family has to pay $30. They get it for free.
Yeah, so that kind of gives you like a rough idea of what his show was all about. You know, he would just sort of go on there. Again, it was a very low budget, like just sort of talking about sports and things like that, and then just sort of explaining what he was doing at City Hall, which I think, you know, it was a smart strategy and a smart way to just get the word out, tell people what it is that he's doing. Obviously, you know, from the type of stuff that he's talking about there, he got a lot of pushback from people in the media and from other councillors that disagreed with him. So, you know, that's Rob Ford for you on the radio.
And you know what? We may not agree with every single position that he has in terms of his platform or every decision he made or whatever. But at the end of the day, Ford Nation, controversial as some people deem it to be, was smart. I mean,
Yeah.
you and I look at us. We haven't really spent a dime on this podcast. I mean, I know you invested in your microphone, but other than that, like you and I have and I'm not saying that we get even a micro of a percent of the listener or viewership that he would get. But the point is, like you and I, as average people, can broadcast our own show in this modern age of YouTube and Spotify and Zoom and all that sort of stuff. He was doing that 10 years ago. He was speaking to average people on a unregulated platform, i.e. YouTube, i.e. the internet, just getting his word across. And he's and exactly, it was actually brilliant because he's working around and bypassing traditional media, which, as you pointed out, is not going to be in his favor. Again, we have to remember just how skewed the media is in Toronto, whether you like it or not. And so that was a brilliant play on his part, just to get his voice out there on a platform that's basically null and void of any sort of regulation or consequences.
Exactly. I mean, you know, he did some really smart campaigning and everything like that. But at the same time, like, you know, Rob had his failings, and it was a very difficult thing to watch as a fan of Rob Ford, to see things start to fall apart. You know?
Are we going to finally get to the good stuff, Alex?
Not just yet. We're almost there. First thing I want to address is the Cut the Waste challenge. Do you remember this?
Oh, yes, please play the clip. Please.
Okay, so the Cut the Waste challenge was when Rob Ford first became mayor. He started this really big campaign to lose 50 pounds in 5 months, and it was this thing, like, it was in the news. Okay, the mayor says he's going to lose 50 pounds, you know, and again, you know, I'm not body shaming anybody or anything like that, but Rob Ford and Doug Ford, you know, like, they were both like very big sort of husky guys, and they got a lot of criticism for that. And, you know, a lot of people made fun of them for that. So they did it. They put it out there. They said, you know, this is what we're going to do. We're going to lose 50 pounds. And yeah, basically they went on sort of a yo-yo diet that lasted for a few months. I think at one point he had lost about 22 pounds. And then, you know, after the 5 months had come to an end, he had gained the weight back, and he was at about had lost about 17 pounds, you know, down from 330.
Jeez.
And yeah, he just went out there. He weighed himself on the scale. You know, in true Chris Farley fashion, stepping down off the scale, he twisted his ankle, and it was just
incredible.
Like, it was just a mess.
He might have cut off the gravy train at City Hall, but it was definitely flowing into his house for a few years. Am I right?
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
And so he said, you know, I just want to thank everybody for their support. I could have done better. Anyways, we'll keep working hard to cut down.
Just play the clip, Alex. Play the clip. Play the clip.
I don't have a clip for that.
You don't have a clip for this. You built it up and you don't even have a clip.
But yeah, I just thought that was just like,
oh,
you know, it was just one of those things. It was one of those indicators that maybe something is wrong, right?
Is this why I'm still putting on weight? Is because I follow I was following Rob Ford for my fitness advice? Is that why?
Maybe you shouldn't follow Rob Ford.
Okay.
But yeah, so he threw in the towel on that. You know, again, during his election campaign, some things came to light that 10 years ago when he was in Florida, he was pulled over, and then, you know, he said that he refused to give them what do you call it? Like a breathalyzer test. And he was charged for refusing to give a breathalyzer test. And of course, after a little while, it came out, oh, well, that wasn't the whole truth. Actually, he was charged with driving under the influence. And then he did end up having to do 50 hours of community service as a result of that. So, all these things were coming up. Voters were really not swayed by that. The way they saw it is like, that's his personal life. I don't really care about his personal life as long as he has respect for my tax dollars. And the reality is there is a limit to that. There's only so much tolerance that you can have for somebody's personal life. And as we started to learn as time went on, that his personal life was going off the rails. Meanwhile, he was doing a pretty good job as mayor. So at one point, there was a media publication that came out and said there is a video that has been released, that wasn't released, but that has been submitted to us, showing Rob Ford smoking crack. And this was like a really big scandal all of a sudden. Everybody's like, the mayor smoking crack, is this just like an attack on him? Like it wasn't uncommon for the media to be attacking him. And the reality is that this video did exist, and Rob Ford did eventually have to admit that this is a reality. This is something that actually happened, and he did in fact smoke crack. The video had yet to surface, but he did finally fess up to it and just go out there and just tell everybody about it. So here, without any further ado, here is the moment of admission.
I was elected to come down here and clean up the mess, and I know I have done that. Have I made mistakes, Councillor Thompson? You're absolutely right, I've made mistakes. Personal mistakes. But these mistakes was not in this council chamber. It was in my personal life. I sincerely apologize. I understand the embarrassment I caused every member of this council. I understand the embarrassment that I've caused every resident in the city. I'm humiliated by it, but I cannot change the past, Councillor Thompson. All I can do is move on, and that's what I'm doing.
Have you purchased illegal drugs in the last 2 years?
Yes, I have.
There you go. That was it. That was a very big moment in Toronto politics. I mean, the city exploded onto the world headlines. Yes. All of a sudden, This was not just Toronto news. This was all across the world. Everybody was talking about the mayor of Toronto buying and using crack cocaine.
We haven't even gotten to the good video yet, which I hope you have queued up. I mean, let me just say, it's one thing for like, the average Joe. Like, don't forget, I mean, even in Ontario, cannabis was legalized, I think, back in 2018. But prior to then, you go and pick up like a couple grams of weed or something, like not a big deal. But the thing is, this is not weed. This is, in this particular instance, we're talking about harder drugs, and it's not an average guy. And what these politicians like Rob Ford have to remember is that if you're going to pursue a career in politics, your life is going to be scrutinized. It doesn't matter if it's provincial politics, municipal politics, federal politics. You're signing up to be in the spotlight, kind of like a celebrity who's in the film and media industry, starring in films. If you're a politician, the camera's going to be on you. The microscope's going to be on you, your family, and your friends, right? Like it's just part of the business. And so if you have the personality type of Rob Ford, where you kind of put everything out there and hang around with the wrong kinds of people and do these things, well, you're setting yourself up for a scandal, because this is not, you know, your average worker going down and buying a couple grams. This is the mayor of a major Ontario city, the capital city of Ontario, buying hard drugs. What do you think's going to happen?
I mean, this was a weird time in Toronto because everybody at this point knew that this video existed, but it was still being held back. Like it wasn't available to the public. So there was a lot of talk about it. And there was also a lot of people saying, well, you know, again, this is kind of his personal life. Obviously, he made a really big mistake. And, you know, maybe he can move past this and just continue to, you know, focus on his job and be a good mayor and that type of thing. But the reality, you know, was suddenly that other videos were starting to emerge. And
yes.
Not necessarily the crack video, but other things were starting to show up.
Because I'm going to kill the fucking guy. I'm telling you, it's first degree murder. But I'll talk when I'll brother. Give me the phone. I'll let it. No holds barred, brother. He dies or I die, brother. I'm telling you, brother, you've never seen me fucking go, brother. You think so, brother? But when he's down there, I'll rip his fucking throat out. I'll poke his eyes out. I will fuck when he's dead. I'll make sure that motherfucker's dead. I need fucking 10 minutes to make sure he's dead.
Yeah. So this is like, who knows what this is? I mean, this is definitely, you know, alcohol involved, but you know, when somebody's in that kind of like a high gear, like, you know, super like coked out is what I'm thinking.
Coked out for sure.
Yeah.
I think there's a little coke and a little alcohol in there. And Alex, as I said, I'm just going to echo my last statement. When you sign up to be in politics, be prepared to be scrutinized. And it's like, even if he was going to have these conversations behind closed doors, let's say he was sniffing a couple lines, powdering his nose, having a couple brews or maybe 10 brews, who knows, or whatever the fuck else he was consuming that night. Even then, like whatever, it's behind closed doors, maybe not the best, you know, maybe there's a bit of a lapse of judgment there, but it's behind closed doors. But then you add on top of that, the video. He allowed someone to take fucking video of it. That's the thing that bothers me so much. It's not even the fact that he did some recreational partying. It's the fact that he allowed himself to get videotaped. That's the thing that bothers me. It's like, how fucking stupid do you have to be to go party your ass off, say all these fucking death threats, and just, you know, go on a rant go on a cokehead rant and have someone fucking videotape it. That's the thing that just blows my mind.
I see what you're saying. The thing is like when I see this clip, I see somebody that is black out drunk.
Oh,
you know?
yeah,
Like
100%.
When I have a few too many drinks, I don't think I've ever been to the point where I can't recollect, you know, what happened. You know? At least I'm like somewhat present. Yeah. But, you know, a guy like Rob Ford, it seems to me like he could put down a lot of alcohol. He's the type of guy that could, quote, handle his alcohol.
Supposedly.
You know, yeah. So allegedly, right? So, you know, there's a lot of alcohol in his system. He doesn't really know what's going on at this point. Like it looks to me like he's just completely out of his mind.
Yeah.
So again, we're all sort of like waiting for this crack video to emerge, and more videos are emerging, not the crack videos, but just other separate incidents are emerging. So I'm going to go ahead and play another one here.
Almost exactly 2 months ago, Rob Ford agreed to an interview on this broadcast and promised he was done with alcohol, finished. Now the Toronto mayor has broken the promise and is back to some of his old behavior. Today, Ford admitted he's drinking again after another video showing him rambling and using offensive language hit the internet. Ron Charles has that.
Bro, we're counter-surveilling the guy, you know what I mean?
In the latest video, Rob Ford is in a restaurant speaking a pretty authentic, if somewhat slurred, Jamaican patois.
I said, bro, just cut some. No, man, no money, man. Ja.
He seems to be talking to someone he knows in vulgar terms about the city's police chief. In the video filmed last night, Ford does not appear to be entirely sober.
Let me just ask, straight up yes and no on a couple of things.
And yet, just 2 months ago, during this interview with Peter Mansbridge, Ford swore off alcohol.
Are you like off alcohol now? You're
Completely.
done with alcohol.
Finished.
You'll never drink again.
Finished.
You know, I've had a come to Jesus moment, if you want to.
Ha!
There you go. Oh man. I mean, part of me is just really impressed that he could speak in Jamaican patois.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
that's a really great talent to have as a mayor, just to have that in your back pocket. That's amazing.
Something to add, something he should have added to his resume on his platform.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So, you know, as things are heating up, like the press are just hounding him at this point. Like, and it's not just the Canadian press, it's press from all over the world are coming to Toronto, trying to get, you know, just a clip of Rob Ford. Everybody all over the world is watching this. And right in the midst of this media frenzy, he drops this little doozy. And I think you'll appreciate this one, Steve.
Oh, yes.
That's all I have to say for now. And the next thing I want to call Mayor Britannia in Hamilton and tell him that we're going to have to spank their little tiger cats. Oh, and the last thing was Olivia Gondak. It says that I wanted to eat her pussy, Olivia Gondak. I've never said that in my life tour. I would never do that. I'm happily married. I've got more than enough to eat at home. Thank you very much.
What about drinking and driving?
I've got enough to eat at home, ladies and gentlemen. That's the lockdown lowdown for tonight. No, seriously. And you know what's so funny is, so I just watched the movie Run This Town or whatever, and they actually make mention of that moment. Now, I don't know how much, obviously you or I were not actually, you know, in Rob Ford's office during some of these supposed, you know, buddy partying events with his staffers, but there's a lot of, you know, controversy and news out there around him doing some really shady stuff with his staffers, the way he would touch them or grope them or, you know, hug them or just, you know, verbally abuse them. And so it doesn't.
Now, that's all alleged.
It's alleged. No, it is alleged.
There's no evidence of that. And I think the situation that he's talking about there was you know, somebody, one of the city hall employees accusing him of something, right? So
Fair
again,
enough.
like, you know, I'm not saying it's not possible. Anything is possible, but
I think it's possible.
There is a lot of hearsay around this. You know, obviously we know that, you know, Mayor Ford is a flawed figure, and he's definitely made a lot of mistakes, and who knows what he could do in a drunken stupor. But we also know that there are a lot of people, sort of like left-leaning people on city council, a lot of people in the media who are very invested in unseating him from his job as mayor as well. So it's really hard to say exactly what happened.
Okay, so fair enough in that I haven't read every single article under the sun, admittedly, so I don't know the full extent to like what's been proven or what's not been proven here. But let's assume that there was some truth to that, because I do want to always, something that I've learned is that when someone like a young staffer goes out and makes some sort of accusation like that, it actually damages their career as well. And so I think you have to give some credibility to the victims here, or the alleged victims, because they wouldn't go out and make that kind of accusation knowing that it could have, you know, they wouldn't do it lightly, because there's consequences when you do that, right? And it kind of reminds me of
the consequences that you get, like international attention to your name. There is that, right? I
think, you know, having been educated on women's rights and on all that sort of stuff, there are definite, I do have to say, in a serious note here, there are definite repercussions when women come forward with sexual abuse, alleging those type of things, and it actually hurts them as well. So I'm highly doubtful that she would have made that kind of thing up, because it actually hurts the victim or the alleged victim as well. When they come forward with that kind of stuff. And what I was going to say is I wouldn't put it past Rob Ford. He, you know, we all know that he had an alcohol and substance abuse problems. So when people get to that level of blackout drunk, they lose all sorts of their judgment, and they go ahead and say things that they would never normally say under normal sober thinking circumstances. So I wouldn't put it past him, first of all. And then second of all, it kind of has this, like, in my mind, I kind of tie it in with Donald Trump, where he said, remember when Donald Trump said the comment about grabbing her by the pussy or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
It just makes me feel ashamed about that. Some of it's sort of a white heterosexual man in power privilege kind of thing. And it's kind of it kind of makes you feel icky and disgusting a little bit.
Yeah.
When you hear that kind of stuff said. You know?
I agree 100%. I mean, obviously, whatever happened, like him uttering something to someone, you know, like it definitely could be the case. That's a possibility, but unfortunately, like, we have to go with what we know, and what we know for sure is that these are things that were alleged. There's no proof as far as I know. Like, I haven't read about any proof. I don't know. Maybe it has been proven. Who knows?
Fair enough.
It's hard to say, but either way, it was just a sloppy, messy situation that was just added on top of all of the mess that had, you know, had come about under his leadership as mayor. So it's just, if you can imagine, like most politicians would say that one situation where the woman is accusing him of whatever, that's a really bad day in politics, and when that happens. But when there's that on top of the crack video, on top of the Wendy's video where he's talking in Jamaican patois or whatever, like, on top of all that other stuff, you know, this thing comes about, and it's you know, it just has to make you laugh at a certain point. Like,
tell me you're gonna play
how much worse can it get?
Oh, right? I think it can get a little bit worse. Tell me you have the clip coming up that I think you do, where he makes the admission.
Yeah. So
oh my God, play it.
I'm gonna show the actual Rob Ford crack video, or the audio for our listeners. You know, you might find that this is a little bit anticlimactic. You know, all of this, you know, build up to this moment, and then here it is. This is what we get.
He wants to fight everybody's battles, and it's going to kill you. Excuse me, kill you. Don't do it. The kids are important to you. That's what
basically,
that's what I love.
Just to describe it to people, Rob Ford is muttering to himself. He's really out of it. He's sitting on a little chair, clearly smoking a crack pipe.
Family.
And he's just completely out of his mind.
You're right wing?
Muttering, not really saying anything that makes sense.
Radical guy.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm
Oh, yeah. What the liberals say?
I mean, leave back. Leave back back in. That's right.
Mr. Trudeau right there. I like to get that Justin Trudeau and shove my.
And there you have it, folks.
up
For
his
those,
ass.
you know, this is an audio only podcast, obviously. So if you were living under a rock back in, what was this, 2013? Yeah, 2013. If you were living, you know, on Mars, under a rock, with your hands over your eyes and your ears plugged, let me describe what just happened in that video. The mayor of Toronto just took a hit from a crack pipe. And Alex, the first thing I have to ask you, I've already asked you this earlier in the podcast, is, you know, the illegal act and the self-damaging act of smoking crack, and the addictive act of smoking crack cocaine by someone who's obviously has a very addictive personality in itself is bad. But why is he filming it? Why is he filming it? I don't get it.
Because he wasn't present, like, mentally. Like, it's pretty clear just from the way that he's talking. He was not there. Like, mentally, he was gone.
Yeah. Tell me you have the clip where he's in front of, if you don't have it, I'm going to quit the podcast. The clip where he's in front of the press and making the admission. Play it now.
I already played that. I played that at the beginning.
No. I'm talking about the one where he's in front of the press not in city council, in front of the press. I linked it to you.
Okay, let me find this.
I linked it to you.
It's not too late. It's not too late.
Not too late.
Rob Ford claims he has more than enough to eat at home. No, we already did that.
No. So I gave you, I messaged you. It's the one. Sorry, listeners.
Admits to buying illegal drugs. We did that.
No.
Knocks
There's
over
one-
counselor. We did that one.
There's one where
Admits
I
he
texted
has
you.
Oh, okay. I know which one you're talking about.
Yes.
Here we go, folks. After the commercials.
This is a commercial break. Your sponsor for this episode is Alcoholics Anonymous and Cam H.
Ask me a question back in May, and you can repeat that question.
The question we asked you back in May?
Yeah.
Can you explain
the video didn't
what
You asked me a couple questions, and what were those questions?
Do you smoke crack cocaine?
Exactly. Yes, I have smoked crack cocaine.
When,
But
sir?
no, do I? Am I an addict? No.
When have you
Have I
smoked
tried it? Probably in one of my drunken stupors, probably approximately about a year ago. I answered your question. You asked the question properly, I'll answer it.
How many
yes,
times?
I've made mistakes. All I can do now is apologize and move on.
Have you
I don't
ever
know what.
been
Oh, guys, okay. Can I just?
Yes, please.
All I can say is I've made mistakes. And you guys kept referring to alcohol. There was a couple isolated incidents. There's been times when I've been in a drunken stupor. That's why I want to see the tape. I want everyone in the city to see this tape. I'd like to see this tape. I don't even recall there being a tape and a video, and I know that. So I want to see the state that I was in. But that's exactly it. That's a guy. I don't know what else I can say here. Okay, so I wasn't lying. You didn't ask the correct questions. No, I'm not an addict, and no, I do not do drugs. I made mistakes in the past, and all I can do is apologize. But it is what it is, and I can't change the past. And I can apologize to my family, my friends, my colleagues, and the people of this great city. I can't change it. I can't.
You know what? I made a mistake. It is what it is. The famous words, it is what it is. And Alex, I'm a little bit appalled that you didn't have that clip lined up, because to me, like, let me put it this way. Here's a little anecdote, a little aside, because I'm known for my going off on a tangent. So bear with me, please. I remember I was working at a broadcaster about 10 years ago when this all came to light. And as working at a media broadcasting corporation, we had televisions in our work areas, right, spread out through the different work areas, and we were supposed to be watching our own channel, but no, we had it glued to the news. Every single staff of our media company on that floor had our eyes glued to the TV, because this was erupting back then. And it wasn't just Toronto, Ontario, Canada. This was like international when this thing blew up, man. Like, this guy went on Jimmy Kimmel. Even Jimmy Kimmel got a chance to take a swipe at this guy and just, just get him on the show and entertain the world with the antics of Rob Ford. And so I remember seeing this all unfold, having my eyes glued to the screen and having talks with my coworkers around how embarrassing it was to be a Torontonian on the world stage. I was so embarrassed. Right. And it was that pinnacle moment. I mean, you talked about all these moments leading up to it, admitting in the council chambers that he had bought illicit drugs. There was the patois in the fast food restaurant where he was speaking, Jamaican patois and kind of doing a little racist kind of impersonation. There was, death threats where in his home where he's out of his mind. And this, to me, the biggest moment was him admitting in front of all these journalists, in front of the world, that yes, I've used crack cocaine. And it was that moment, that precise moment, where I'm like, damn, Toronto is the laughing stock of the world.
I would agree with you 100%. Like, this was like a 9/11 moment in Canada. Like, this was absolutely mind-boggling when he made that statement in front of the press. But I would disagree about feeling ashamed. For some reason, this is around the time that I was starting to get really invested in this story, right? And I actually felt very proud to be from Toronto while all of this mess was happening. I thought it was just like really an amazing moment in politics where we were all kind of learning something about the people that were leading us. And it was just the fact that the inmates were running the asylum, so to speak, it was an electrifying moment in Canadian history. And I was very proud to be a part of it. And I knew that someday I'm going to tell my kids about the Rob Ford saga. And, maybe they'll watch this podcast and they'll actually be like, wow, my dad lived in Toronto while Rob Ford admitted to smoking crack cocaine.
Yeah.
And
you know what? And part of it, just to clarify, yes, part of it was fascinating and entertaining from like let me binge on some really good news. Let me get invested in this story, and just like the shock factor of the controversy of watching this unfold and seeing Toronto, which is already, a pretty prevalent city. It is the capital of Ontario, which is the most populous country or province in the country. So Toronto is already pretty well known, but I think internationally, this just put Toronto on the stage that much more. But I guess for me, it was embarrassing that it wasn't like, oh, the Maple Leafs got into the playoffs, or it wasn't a positive thing. It was Toronto got on the stage because we have this buffoon who is basically a crack addict running Canada's biggest city.
Isn't it kind of a rite of passage to be a major world power and then have major world power controversies?
I don't know, man. I'm still going to stick by what I said. It was like, for me, it's like 50% pure embarrassment and 50% entertainment.
It was entertaining, that's for sure. We
For
were all
sure.
and for me, this was kind of a political awakening, because before that, you knew me in my early 20s. When did we ever talk about politics?
No,
literally never.
We were sitting around playing Halo.
Yeah. And that goes for all of my other friends as well.
Yeah.
None of us ever talked about politics. And after Rob Ford, that totally changed everything for me. All of a sudden, I realized how much fun politics could be. And that's what got me thinking. Like, originally I was, I grew up in a very liberal household, very, very pro Jean Chrétien and everything like that. And, but that sort of changed my thinking. And I'm like, okay, although I don't agree with a lot of everything this guy did and many of the things that he said, and his attitude towards, the gay community and stuff like that. There's a lot of things I disagree with. But I started to realize what sort of fiscal conservatism and respecting the taxpayer and all of that was all about. And that kind of started to get me interested in politics. And, so ever since then, I've been very into politics, and I guess you could say I have Rob Ford to thank for that. So I want to sort of close this off talking about Rob Ford's untimely demise. So there was, after this admission, after the videos had come out, there was a lot of pressure on him to resign, or at the very least take a leave of absence or something like that. And maybe you could say that it sort of ratcheted up the tension, increased the temperature of the situation, was the fact that he refused to resign. And in fact, he decided to run for mayor for a second term on top of everything. And for me, watching this whole thing, that actually got me like so much more excited. I could not wait to go to the to the ballot box and vote for Rob Ford after post crack smoking scandal.
Oh man.
I
Oh, and
could not wait.
One thing you glazed over, which I can just, I know we're kind of wrapping it up, but just to fill in a little bit of that, you have to remember that as this was going on, especially towards the latter part of it, when all these different revelations were being made, Norm Kelly, the then deputy mayor, was voted a lot of mayoral powers. He was given a lot of extra power by council, because Rob Ford just wasn't fit to lead. Obviously, he was going through so much personal turmoil that, it was in the best interest of the council to give him powers. And he was pretty much the de facto, de facto acting mayor at that point. In fact, even the staffers, they would take staff away from Rob Ford's office and put them in Norm Kelly's office. And so we just have to remember that element of the story. I think it's important to talk about that, because
thank you for mentioning that before I get ahead of myself here. They had basically voted to strip him of his powers.
Yes.
I doubt that the voters of Toronto all agreed with that, but it's kind of a difficult question, right? Ultimately, there was nothing that he was doing as the mayor that really warranted that. As the mayor, when he showed up to work, he was doing an okay job. Certainly a lot of people disagreed with his style and his policies, but a lot of people really did agree with his policies.
But you know what, Alex, is something. So let me, a little aside. I work in marketing, and marketing is a little bit like politics, which is a little bit like the film and media industry. Is that everything is about optics? And that's something that my manager told me recently. Is that even my character? I know what my character is, right? But the way I present myself to people in other departments, especially working from home, when people don't know me, they don't see me in the office, I have to be careful around how I present myself to others, because if I meet someone for their first time, they don't know who I am deep down inside. They don't know my character. So every time you're in a position like that, again, whether it's marketing or politics or working in cinema or media or whatever, he could be saving people money. He could be stopping the gravy train. He could have fiscal responsibility. But part of what I'm trying to say throughout this entire podcast is that part of that, it goes without saying, it's understood that optics is everything. So forget his accomplishments. If you're smoking crack in videos, even though that's a personal thing and it's happening after work hours on your own personal time, it kind of is a professional thing too, because as a mayor or a premier or a prime minister or a councillor, whatever, you have to show that you're a leader in all aspects of your life.
The thing is, there's all kinds of political leaders that have scandals and things like that happen, right? And, should every time that a political leader has a scandal happen, should we be just stripping them of their powers immediately? It's again, I'm not saying this was right or wrong. Honestly, I feel that, with his substance abuse issues and how far he was clearly going off the rails, and he had seemed to have very little control over his drinking. I think that realistically, something had to be done. But that being said, it was criticized by people in Toronto at the time as being a very undemocratic way of resolving the situation. And basically, the only way to sort of restore democracy in the city was to go out and vote for Rob Ford. So that was what I was going to do. But if I can move on to the final chapter into the story, partway through his campaign for a second term as mayor, he announced that he was diagnosed with cancer. Apparently, he was taken to the hospital after having unbearable abdominal pain. They did some medical imaging, and they found that he had a large tumor in his chest. This was like after the entire world was basically, like, to put it bluntly, the entire world was laughing at Rob Ford. Like, this was just a joke. And, him being on Jimmy Kimmel wiping the sweat off of the fat guy's face, like, it was a joke. And Rob Ford, unfortunately was the butt end of this joke. And it was a moment where I think, like, even his critics kind of realized that this is a real person. And his addiction to alcohol is a struggle that a lot of people deal with. And it is kind of a tragedy in its own way, although it manifested itself in very hilarious and funny ways with all these videos that came out. The reality is that this is somebody that was out of control, dealing with a very serious problem with addiction. And now this person was dying of cancer. And it was a very sobering moment for a lot of people. And I think a lot of the joking around, the SNL sketches about Rob Ford and everybody making jokes about Rob Ford, all of that kind of stopped overnight. And he threw in the towel on the run for mayor. Doug Ford, his brother, stepped in and took over his run, and he didn't win that election, but yeah, it was a very sobering moment. And there's an interview I just want to play with Rob Ford, just discussing his struggles with cancer, and this will it's really kind of a powerful interview, and it kind of hits home for a lot of people that have had cancer or have family members that have.
It's World Cancer Day. It seems very relevant to talk to you and find out how you're doing right now in this whole process.
Well, thanks for asking, Cynthia. It's very kind when people come up and ask how I'm doing. I'm doing the best I can in the situation that I've got in about 6 months ago. I can just keep my head up high every day, take one day at a time, and just keep fighting and keep praying. Got a young family. You just gotta, keep assuring them that Daddy's going to the hospital every day to get better, and that's it. Just, but I'm, not going to mislead anyone. It's a struggle. It's a real struggle. And people tell you, well, don't go to work, go home and relax. No, because when you go home and relax and no one's there, all you do is start thinking.
That's when the demons enter your mind, right?
I don't like that. Yeah, absolutely. I'd rather come here, do my job, go and see people, just keep doing the best I can. But I am tired. But I'd rather be down here, or returning phone calls, or organizing a big event that I'm doing for Montreal Mountain on Saturday night, stuff like that. I love politics. I love going with my kids. They have tennis lessons, swimming lessons. That's what I like to do. But to sit there and just say, just go home and lay around, no.
Do you see it as much as a mental battle as it is a physical one?
Absolutely. A lot of it's in your mind.
the chemo was tough. The chemo was very tough, and I thought, you know, can I get through it? Because I did 1, 2, 3, and they said, oh, you got 2 more, come in for another one, and that's 5 days in the hospital. And it is in your head. I just had to think, okay, this is just the beginning, and I had to just keep rewinding it to when I felt good. But your mind's very strong. I'm a true believer in that. And, there's a lot of this is the unknown. You know, you have a tumor. You can't feel it. You have the side effects, obviously, you know it's there. You can't see it, except for obviously through images. So it is a mental battle. You're in pain, obviously, through the chemo, through the radiation. There is quite a bit of pain involved. But again, it's just got to keep on a positive pursuit, and that's all I can do.
So about a year after that interview, he passed away on March 22nd of 2016.
6 years ago.
Yeah,
so that's that wasn't easy to watch. I mean, I would never wish cancer on my worst enemy. I have a family member, you remember, you and I were both in university when one of my family members, a very close family member, started a battle with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I thank goodness every single day that she is a fighter and battled through it. And she is a survivor, and she's around and living her best life now. So to see that video, yes, you're right, it did hit home a little bit, and it is upsetting to see. And it doesn't matter the crack, the controversies, all the questionable things that he did during his time as mayor, or even prior to being mayor of Toronto when he was a councillor. All that controversy doesn't matter. I would never wish this on anybody. Having seen it with a family member, yes, chemo sucks, radiation sucks, losing your hair sucks, having mental and physical barriers against you sucks. So it's horrible. I'm going to say something controversial, not that I don't want to downplay any of it, because as I said, it's a horrible thing, wouldn't wish it on anyone. However, I sometimes wonder if this is a really dark consequence of some of the choices that he made. And I don't want to downplay like alcoholism and substance abuse, eating disorders, being overweight. Those are all diseases. But I think it's kind of a really dark and unfortunate ending to a train wreck that was happening for a while, right? Like the guy's if you're overweight and morbidly obese like he is, you put yourself at risk for cancer as well as diabetes. If you throw alcohol and drugs and a high stress position like being in politics into the mix with his eating disorder or his obesity, like cancer was pretty much waiting to happen. And I know that's not a nice thing to say, but I was kind of putting that together in my head earlier. Like, again, horrible. I would never wish it on anybody, but you kind of wonder if he had made some better choices earlier on in his life, if maybe the outcome would have been different.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying to a certain extent, but on the other hand, how much is addiction really a choice? It's really a gray area. Like there's no question that like when someone has that much of a drinking problem, when someone is overweight to that extent, there's definitely some real addiction issues.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And he recognized it. I mean, early on he said, like it's not healthy to be this overweight. And the fact that he did grapple with it for a little while and he gave up, but although it was kind of funny at the time, the reality was it was a glimpse into the mind of an addict.
Yeah.
And I have a cousin who struggled with obesity, like like very large. And, you know, and he would freely admit, it's like, I am addicted to sugar and I'm addicted to food.
Yeah.
And, you know, every single day, like you can just sit down and eat a meal and have a pleasant conversation and not really think about it. But for me, it's like, it's all consuming. Like it's all consuming. Like I am obsessed with food. And you know, it's a real gray area. Like I'm not an expert, but you know, like was any of this really a choice, or was it something that was just part of who he was? He couldn't.
Yeah, maybe I was a little bit harsh when I said it. When I don't want to downplay it. Again, I want to say first and foremost that I would never wish this on anybody. I guess what I'm trying to express is it's so unfortunate to see someone go down that road, choice or not. And you make a good point. Like an addiction is an addiction is an addiction. So it could be crack, it could be sex, it could be gambling, it could be video games, whatever. Addictions come in different shapes and forms. 100%. It was such a shame. And to your point, we kind of laughed at him a little bit when he was going through all this in the media, but really this is such a dark end of the chapter. And it really puts everything in perspective that, you know, as much as we were kind of laughing as we saw Jimmy Kimmel wiping the sweat on American television on the Late Show, whatever it is with Jimmy Kimmel, at the end of the day, it was just a dark chapter in his life and a dark chapter to end his life, and really a dark chapter for the people of Toronto to see him go out this way, and a dark chapter for his brother and his family as well. So it really does open up your eyes to the consequences of someone who's plagued with addiction in the multiple forms that we've seen with Rob Ford. The dark chapter at the end, really, it's a really horrible thing to see.
Yeah, it's really difficult. And you know what? Like we can only wonder if he would have won that second term in office. It's really, I like to think that he would have, but I don't know.
Personally, I like John Tory. I don't have any beef with John Tory. I think he's like overall, he's like good, responsible mayor, but that's a whole other podcast. I think
I think he's on his third term now. Everybody seems pretty happy with John Tory.
Yes.
He's also a conservative, sort of.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And he comes from a big business background as well. So you know what? Yeah. No, and at the end of the day, like we can either laugh or you look at this. We can either do one of two things: kind of laugh at the controversies, or we can take a lesson from this and say, you know, how can we all better ourselves in the future by using this story as a cautionary tale?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, when situations arise where, you know, you have politicians that have driving under the influence charges and things like that, you know, yeah, maybe they are something that you have to take a little bit more seriously as a voter, possibly. But, you know, when there's no other good options, like, you know, what do you do? I don't know. Maybe I haven't learned anything. I think that if Rob Ford were resurrected and he were to run for office tomorrow, I'd be out there at the ballot box for him. Anyways, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on this very special edition of the Lockdown Lowdown. Thank you, Stupart, for your wisdom and your excellent commentary. Please remember to like, subscribe, check out the Lowdown Facebook page, share it with your friends, all that good stuff. And we will talk to you guys next week.